Hi Deborah, I welcome you to the video series Meet the Expert in Citizen Social Science. I'm really glad that you are here. Founderland, a non-profit organization who is interested to support women of color to found their own business. And at the same time, you are founder as well. And I'm really glad that you are here because you are one of the grantees of the COAC team. And the grantees that mean that you applied with your nonprofit organization to get a grant to do your own research. And the idea was that we swap a little bit the seats, that you are behind the driver's seat and do your research, that you define your research interest, and that we support you as academic scientists in your scientific endeavor. And my very first question to you is, who are you when you are a citizen social scientist? So what is your understanding of the role to be a citizen scientist?
Thanks for having me, Stefan.
Yes.
And I mean, it's a really great question. And I think that to answer it, I would just maybe add a bit of context about who I am a little bit more. So with Founderland, our organization, we started it because there is such a challenge in Europe where the majority of venture funding goes to one kind of person primarily. And we wanted to change the game because we knew that, talent is everywhere. Women founders, women of color founders, people of color founders, and so forth. But that access is really just different when we have the obstacles of gender, race, and ethnicity involved. So when we started our organization, we heard so many times, how big is this problem? Why is this even a focus for your organization? And we had some data points. We knew that, for example, 90% of venture capital goes to people who are so-called in network, right? So if you went to the same university, come from a similar socioeconomic background and social club or social status, you have a better chance of getting funding. And we all know what that tends to look like, right? We also knew that less than 0.5% of venture funding went to women of color founders in Europe, which is a really dismal statistic. But we didn't have much more than that. And so we already knew as an organization that to really move the dial, we needed more granular data, whether that was qualitative or quantitative, ideally both, to really kind of outline where we are right now in order to position ourselves on where we want to get to, right? Where we want to get to as a community or an ecosystem in Europe. So we had this pain point ourselves as an organization, to put it in a certain way. And when we saw this call, even though I and my co-founders are not academics, we are multiple times over entrepreneurs, we saw this as an amazing opportunity to kind of work at this challenge that we faced as an organization, and that also many organizations like ours that support underrepresented founders were also facing. So in many ways, we wanted to solve our problem, but we also wanted to kind of create a blueprint, if you will, for other organizations to collect data or information that could empower this change. So to kind of go to the point, really, with social science and citizen science, this was vocabulary that, I mean, I'll speak for myself initially. I had to learn and understand, what does this mean? I'd been to university before, but this felt like something new. And my understanding of who could do science or social science was maybe colored with my experience at university, where you maybe need a certain degree in front of your name, or a certain kind of rigor to your question or your approach in order to call what you're doing social science. And so, I think that for us, this understanding was one that was evolving over time in this project so far, where we started to learn that actually we have what it takes, being who we are in this issue and with this question that we're kind of really focused on, to reach interesting answers that have actual practical weight in the world. And my understanding of this concept really became one where it's a collaborative approach. The world of academia, the world of practitioners coming together to solve a real problem in the world with a certain kind of rigor and approach to solving that problem.
And so you already connected your experience to your college experience, and but do you recognize the difference research that you did at the school and now to be a citizen scientist? Is there some difference for you?
I mean, I would say, just to start off with, there's a lot more people involved. And you know, I went through the or rather, I had the privilege to write a thesis in university, and I'd never done something like that before. So that was my first time creating a report and taking a certain kind of almost scientific process to get to a conclusion. But that was my question and my conclusion and my path. And I mean, what we've experienced so far with this project is, you know, it's the Founderland team. It's also our community. You know, the women of color who are in our ecosystem, who day in and day out face these problems that we not only theorize about, but we think about, right? And it's also academics, and it's this integration of a lot of viewpoints and stakes. And, you know, I think the other side of it too, for me and for us, has been that we as entrepreneurs tend to start with like the outcome that we want and then try to get there in general. And it's been kind of an unlearning, which has been actually a really good one to, you know, I think we were laughing about this in the early days where we were like, so this is the answer that we want to get to. And it was like, no, this is a process, and let's see what happens coming out of it. And there's not all the voices at the table yet. So this was an unlearning for us, really, and has actually opened up so much interesting insights by simply having all the stakeholders involved with a real world problem in our case, and not being as fixated from our kind of entrepreneurial business mind on an outcome and an agenda, so to speak, in this way.
So you already told me how you did get involved into this project, but could you elaborate a little bit more about this? So were you seeking actively for a call to do citizen social science? I assume not so, because I haven't heard about many calls in this kind. So can you remember the first time that you read about it, and what was on your mind, and how did you came up with a plan to write a proposal?
Right. So it's a really good question. And I was also reflecting on this beforehand, kind of how we got to where we are today. And, you know, no, we didn't have it so kind of codified in our minds that we had this pain point, and so the solution was to create our own report. So it was really more, this was constantly there. It was the kind of the elephant in the room, because we would speak with, you know, with people, say, in public funding for entrepreneurs, or the private markets, so venture capitalists and so forth, and constantly be questioned about our focus. And is it too narrow? Or why couldn't we make it broader and just focus on gender, and not just gender and race and ethnicity in our case? So it was always there. And we were pretty good about kind of collating the information that we had so far on this topic in Europe. Then we saw this call. And I have to say, it was a call around a broader topic of sustainability in cities. And, you know, we saw something very interesting in that, because there was also this focus in Berlin, which is where our organization is headquartered, where we have the highest concentration of women of color founders in our community. You know, we saw that there was really actually so much around sustainability of any city when we think about equal participation in business formation. So we made that argument in our report, and then crossed our fingers in our application, rather. And it was really a very exciting fall evening when we got the news that you know, we were able to really then undertake this project. Now, I mean, when that happened, then we're like, well, how does how do we get from this excitement to an outcome? And that's where we really then started to kind of wrap our heads around this concept.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that you have a special expertise, a special perspective on doing research? So normally I plan the whole research as an academic, and then I go out into the world and I pick up some data, and then I go back into my office and then I analyze it. But do you think that you contribute with a certain expertise perspective to bring forward these citizen science projects?
I think that there might be some maybe interesting overlaps to that kind of scientific approach to research and the approach an entrepreneur takes to take an idea from the idea to some initial concept that's live in the world. Mm-hmm. Both require some level of hypotheses, right? Then you explore and you get to a certain outcome. I mean, the processes are different, but there's processes. So I think that there was this overlap in the sense of there's going to be steps that need to be taken to get from, where we are today, the beginning of this project, to where we are now. Those were ones that we had to learn. But I think that this muscle around, well, there's a kind of logical order of things made sense to us.
Mm-hmm. And if you go through the course of your research project, were there some moments where you did new experience or where you experienced something surprisingly?
I think that, being in many ways first-time social scientists collectively, my co-founders and I, we initially wanted to bite off way more than we could chew, realistically within the duration of this project and the scope of it. So, I mean, I think you recall we wanted the number of interviews we wanted to make and the kind of qualitative aspect were much higher numbers. And we had no idea, what was realistic. So I think that also this very collaborative approach from day one was also, we had a certain enthusiasm, of course, right? Mm-hmm. That's also what's driving our ambition at the beginning, which is still there, but now tempered with the reality of, well, when you are engaging so many different stakeholders in this process of getting to the insight, there's a process there that needs its own time. Mm-hmm. And so this was something that, we didn't quite really understand, I think, at the beginning. But then it started to make a lot of sense as we got really into it and started to bring on co-researchers and go through this process together.
And what do you think, what are the special benefits for citizens when we do research differently than the conventional research or science?
I think it's empowering. I mean, that's the first word that comes to my mind. Because again, I thought this world was not for me. And it's a bit silly to say because then what are we doing if we're not trying to tend to meaningful questions in the world collectively? So this was something that was quite eye-opening for me. And I would be really actually quite excited to engage in this kind of exploration again in the future.
Mm-hmm. And then we confronted you to do the research in a participatory manner. So we did some recommendations or had some demands towards your research. You were not totally free, so it was an experimentation to invent something new, probably. Important concepts for citizen social science is participation, collaboration, co-design. And my question is, what does it mean for you to do it in a participatory way, research?
I mean, I think that one keyword just now was co-design. And to be very candid with you, I think initially we were so precious about the designing. We wanted to design, the questions and what was important to cover. But really, again, in opening things up and having, multiple stakeholders involved from day one, like what is the approach? Is it qualitative? Is it quantitative? to what's the duration of the interview, to what are the key things to ask, what is maybe a dear question, but we can maybe let it go because there's an argument that makes sense for another one. We ended up with something I'm so excited about, but I couldn't have created it alone, full stop. And so I think that was, really kind of trusting the process, very much so, that, there is enough, with stakeholders, there's a real stake, to actually use the word for its real meaning, in getting to, a question that is the core question and is a meaningful question, that, we don't just sit in that room and answer, but we have to then go into the world and find the insight. And so in this way, I think that this was very both eye-opening, but also very rewarding, this approach of co-design. For example, when I think about entrepreneurship and building a business, there's always one founder that will take a lead in some way. You either say divide and conquer, if you will. One person handles the business plan, the other person maybe handles the design of everything. You update each other, and it's all kind of separated in this way. And so this idea of co-design, I think, has interesting applicability in other spheres, because there is something really rewarding when you take the time to get to the heart of the matter and really have this healthy debate over what is essential and what is not.
Okay, my final question is, can you envision a future for certain social science? Do you have ideas about further developments? What are necessities in this field?
Yeah, I absolutely see a future, because again, the world we're in has so many really essential questions that need further insight. And it's not for one sphere to answer, not for purely politicians or business people or academics. So I do think that big problems require a committee and stakeholders across all spheres to really have a 360 perspective on, what is a solution, or what are viable solutions. I wish I knew about this concept earlier, because now I really do see, even in my own, my own life around business and thinking about entrepreneurship, the applicability of this concept. So I hope for a wider future for this concept, that more people know about it. And I'm really keen to kind of explore it further myself.
Okay, Deborah, thank you very much that you joined our video series here, and I wish you best for our collaborative project that we have together. Thank you very much.